1940, and so I'm 74 years old at this point, and went to Korea after college for 2 years of my required military training, and I had a chance to teach some English, and a lot of the students were college students. And I initially met my wife-to-be as one of the college students that was taking English conversation classes. It was only 11 years or so removed from the end of the Korean War, but the remnants of the Korean War were pretty much gone. But the rebuilding was just kind of getting underway. And yet you had this great sense of wanting to do things in a new and modern and acceptable way that would represent not only Korea but would achieve the results of what a people in a country wanted to do for themselves. Old people, young people, little kids, they all had this, and even people that weren't so nice, when you're going shopping or you're going to the market, different types of places, sometimes you could just still sense there was a great respect for and hope that things were getting better. The Korea of today isn't quite as traditional as what I saw back in the 60s. So, in fact, in a way, it was a little disappointing to me to see the shedding of some sense of tradition, at least visually, when you see the buildings and so on. But change comes, and that's what they wanted to do, was make change. I remember driving with one of my estimators out into the countryside, and off about 1 kilometer, no, one li, 500 feet, was a little Korean village with the thatch roof houses, maybe 20 or 30 houses, all at angles and everything. You could just see, past the rice field, and you could see that village. And I said to him, "That looks like such a pretty little village there." And he turns to me, he says, and of course he's more modern Korean, he works for the American government as an estimator. So, but it's so poor. I had re-met Sulja, who was to become my wife, and here was at that time, a modernized young Korean woman who was interested in more than the narrow parochial life in Korea, and yet still retained all her Korean identity and sense for Korean culture. I saw and lived a lot of Korean type life just to see and know what it would be like, and hope to expose my 2 kids to as much of that as we could, because once we got to the U.S., they wouldn't have that opportunity. So sure enough, when they came to the U.S. at that age, they started speaking English. One of my hopes was that my children would be half Korean, looks or hearts or whatever, because I wanted that to be in there. I never told them that. I just wanted that to be, and that's why I wanted Sulja to instill as much of her personality and background on those kids. Of course, first when we lived in Korea, their first few years of the children's life, too, but also even when we got here. Sulja thought the kids would go to religious school at the Jewish congregation, and someone asked her, "How did you decide to do that?" Well, she thought to raise them as Buddhists would be more of a minority than to be raised as Jewish. And of course, Jewish was quite a minority, especially in Tacoma. There weren't many. There were only about 10 kids, 12 kids, and Angela, each one of the kids' religious school class. That was about it. But so she was very tolerant, and she allowed us to observe the Jewish holidays, in our home, and participated in things. And she even started to learn a little Hebrew just to see. And so I never knew Hebrew too very well myself, so she didn't have to learn too much, but so she never did. And I never asked her to convert to Judaism because I wanted her to retain her own identity without trying to change. One of the great thrilling moments for me was about 2 years ago, that Sulja mentioned, she went down to the annual convention of Jewish congregants. Angela was going to be one of the clergy people invited to do a portion of the service. I think it was at the Saturday morning service when Angela was singing. She said, "I would like to introduce my mother, who was Buddhist, but I want to thank her for allowing me to be raised as Jewish." And when she was introduced, Sulja explained, she kind of bowed to the audience, and 5,000 Jewish leaders from this country applauded her. But that particular story, to me, represents the culmination of everything I dreamed of. Everything. Believe me. My name is Fred Warnick, and this is my Korean American story.